I hear is yap, 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 yap. Ain't talking about nothing, right? Watch this. We gon' bring that pressure.
Just a little FYI, FYF 20K sub 6 months, what's next? They been hating at first, now they calling us the best. Hit up YouTube, tell them cut the check. Just a FYI, FYF 20K sub 6 months, what's next? Woo, fuck your feelings, we all know who the real is. I be getting to it, ain't wasting no time. Walking straight in, we ain't waiting in line. Fuck your feelings, you don't care about mine. You a YouTube gangster, don't be yelling out slime. Or you talking LB, talking Ticket TV. Ain't nobody watching them, all the viewers be sleep. 5 years in, all your subs is your friends. Ticket TV, watch your cars again. Just a little FYI, FYF 20K sub 6 months, what's next? They been hating at first, now they calling us the best. Hit up YouTube, tell them cut the check. Just a FYI, FYF 20K sub 6 months, what's next? Woo, fuck your feelings, we all know who the real, all know.
It's FYF Sports, man. It's Lamont. We back. We back with another podcast video. And today, we got to talk about the Charlotte Hornets and the future of Lamelo Ball with this team. And again, you know, we've done a couple videos on Lamelo Ball and the Hornets. We really try to focus on the reality, you know, of this team and what they can actually do to build a championship team around Lamelo Ball. So that's what we're going to be focusing in on today. Before we get started, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to the video if you haven't done so already. We're grinding to 20K. 20K is right around the corner. All right. Salute to everybody that's been sharing the videos, engaging in the videos, supporting the content, you know, joining the Facebook groups, watching from the blogs, or wherever you watch our stream from. Salute to everybody that's helped us get to this point right here. We're going to keep grinding. We're going to keep giving you guys unique content. Again, as always, we have to keep the moniker of the channel in mind whenever we speak. It's FYF Sports. It's forget your feelings. All right, when we talk on sports, you know, unlike just your general fan, we have to bring in the realism of sports. And whenever we're talking about especially professional sports, as we are right now, you got to talk about the business side of basketball. So, you know, we're going to jump right into this video. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're just got to break down this Charlotte Hornets roster. All right. We know we have to start with Lamelo Ball. And Lamelo Ball is right here on the screen. We're starting with Lamelo Ball because he's the future of the team. They're going to build around him. And I'm making this video because, you know, I listen to a lot of videos. You know, you got a lot of supporters of the Ball family, which is a great thing. Again, I tell people I'm a big supporter of the Ball family. All right. But we have a lot of up and coming and new channels that have a primary focus on speaking on the Lamelo Ball, the Charlotte Hornets, you know, from DKM to Ball Facts to Hoop Jargon, people like that. You know, they have a strong affinity towards this particular player and the Charlotte Hornets. I do as well. But again, I have to think a little bit more logically about the Charlotte Hornets situation because I got to take the fandom out of it. I can't be a fan when I assess not just Lamelo Ball as a player, but his situation on the Charlotte Hornets as they are built right now. So that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about this roster. What can they do this year in the trade market? And what is the realistic outcome? Like, what is the realistic timetable for when they can put a competitive team around Lamelo Ball that we can genuinely say this team is a playoff contending team? So we start with Lamelo Ball. Obviously, this year so far, he's been great. You know, now a lot of Lamelo Ball fans have been a bit disappointed with how James Borrego, Mitch Kupchak, and Michael Jordan have brought Lamelo Ball along slowly. Again, I was kind of a bit understanding towards how they brought him into this. I mean, when you think about it, playing 82 game, and not just the 82 game season, but playing a condensed, and this year is a condensed 72 game season, where there's no training camp, no summer league, no real preseason to get these guys ready conditioning wise. And when we look at Lamelo Ball's situation, he has never played a season anywhere, whether it's high school, whether it was Aspire Academy, whether it was at Australia, where he's played this many games in such a short amount of time. All right. And I think they're doing everything possible so he doesn't hit that prototypical rookie wall. So even though he's played professionally in Australia, he only played 11 games. His body never adapted to playing a high volume of games over months and months and months. 72 game season is not easy. You have to deal with a lot of knick-knack injuries, a lot of wear and tear. All right. You have to change your diet because, again, some players deal with extreme weight loss. You have to deal with and adapt to a lot of different things. And this season, a little bit different from most, is condensed. So they're playing a lot more back-to-backs, sometimes back-to-back-to-back. All right, they're on the road longer. All right, they have to, they have to quarantine. So nothing's standard or typical about this season. There's a lot for him to adjust to. I appreciate how the coaching staff brought him along slowly, and now we finally see him in the starting lineup. We finally see Lamelo Ball in the starting lineup. Again, there's a big Lamelo Ball fan base out there. They have been calling for Lamelo Ball to be put into the starting lineup. I've been telling these guys, look, it's going to happen. It has now happened, especially with Terry Rozier having an ankle injury. Terry Rozier luckily is back. And even with Terry Rozier coming back, I like how James Borrego, 20 games in, said, you know what, I'm going to keep him in the starting lineup, and we're going to see what we have going forward. So LaMelo Ball so far this year, 13.6 points a game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. Again, we're going to see those numbers go up, hopefully, especially if he doesn't hit that rookie wall. Most rookies do hit some type of wall, especially when teams start bringing out advanced scouting reports against you and they start really game planning for you and what you do best. And with him now being in the starting lineup, we're going to see a bit more of that, especially after the All-Star break. So I think a lot of these rookies this year get the benefit of no advanced scouting reports being made on them. All right. With a lot of these teams just having a game plan on the fly, we're seeing guys like Tyrese Halliburton and even James Wiseman for some games, Anthony Edwards, and a lot of these rookies are playing a lot better than we expected, and a lot of people are saying this rookie class was better than we thought. But I think it's too early to really judge that because a lot of these NBA teams are in a peculiar situation, no advanced scouting reports. We're really going to see what these rookies are made of after the All-Star break. That's my predicament on that. But we have LaMelo Ball. He's the centerpiece of this team. This is who they're going to build around. We don't have to talk about his salary. We don't have to talk about it. And obviously you can see his salary here. He's making he's making $7 million this year. That's going to go up to $8 million. All right. Then you have 2 team options for $8 million and then $10 million. And then he's obviously going to have that qualifying offer in 2024-25 when he's up to sign his rookie extension, which because he'll be a restricted free agent, most rookies go ahead and accept that qualifying offer primarily because any deal that any other team offers, the team will probably match it, and LaMelo Ball will be stuck in Charlotte for at least 6 to 7 years, barring any trade or major injury. So I think LaMelo Ball is a mainstay here. He's somebody that you don't have to worry about. Now, when we look at the salaries here, before I go on to some of these other players, I do want to talk about Nicholas Batum. Nicholas Batum, a lot of people think that he was waived, and no, he was not waived. His money was stretched out due to a stretch provision. So you're going to see Nicholas Batum, you're going to see his money count against the Charlotte Hornets books all the way until 2022-23. All right. Now, the good thing is that it's just $9 million per year. It's not a huge hit. It could play a major factor maybe in the 2022-23 year if they're starting to sign a lot of big name free agents and they're really trying to build a competitive team that can really get into the playoffs. But we'll have to wait and see how that really affects the salary cap. But I think $9 million a year over the next 3 years, getting Batum, that's just $27 million that's owed. I think that's a great deal for the Hornets, the way they were able to stretch that out over 3 years. And it really saves them on a year by year basis in salary cap. And they also were able to waive him. They cleared that roster spot so they can start bringing in pieces to build around Lamelo Ball. All right, so we got Lamelo Ball. We're starting with him first. He's the centerpiece of the Charlotte Hornets. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next player. All right, so next up we have Devonte Graham. Okay, so Devonte Graham, by a lot in the YouTube community, he's been nicknamed Tay-Bay. They say that he's a favorite of James Borrego. And that potentially could be right. Coaches do have favorites, and they tend to lean on those favorites in tough times. You know, these are the players that they trust most. Now, you can agree or disagree with it. It's just something that happens in sports. It's not just something that's happening with the Charlotte Hornets. It happens with every single team on every single level. Coaches, they go with the guys that they trust. You know, for example, Malik Monk on this team is a great player, but he got a number of DNPs to start the season. Why? Because the coaches don't trust him. He's a great player. He could play, as you saw in that overtime win against Miami. He could put up big numbers, but the coaches don't consistently trust him, and his playing time is always going to be fluctuating because when it matters most, he's probably not going to be playing. So when we're talking about Devonte Graham, all right, Devonte Graham situation is very unique. And it's very unique for a number of reasons. It's unique because he's outplayed his value by a long shot. And so because he's outplayed his value so dramatically, all right, and he's an expiring contract, all right, it puts the Charlotte Hornets in a situation where they now have to decide, how do we proceed with Devonte Graham? Do we continue to let him play? Because obviously his 14.3 points a game, his 5.9 assists per game, that's obviously helping the team. The downside to that is, to get that 14.3 points per game, he's actually shooting a lot of shots. He's a high volume shooter. He's an undersized guard, struggles to defend in the man-to-man settings or man-to-man matchup zone settings. That's his issue. But because of how he carried the Charlotte Hornets last year, James Borrego looks at Devonte Graham as one of his go-to guys. And this is what you have to do. All right. Now, here's the dilemma. The way that this Charlotte Hornet team has played this year, Terry Rozier looks like the better fit. But Devonte Graham in his $1.6 million contract, which is expiring, is not tradable. All right. And the reason why it's not tradable is because in the NBA, when you trade a player, salaries have to match. All right. And Devonte Graham is the type of player, whether you like him or not, he's going to make anywhere between 10 to 15 million a year with whatever contract that he signs. Whether you agree, whether you like it or not, he's going to command money in the free agent market. How can the Charlotte Hornets trade Devonte Graham now and actually get equal value with him only making 1.6 million? The unfortunate reality of this situation with Devonte Graham is that he's untradeable. At that 1.6 million clip, the best that you can hope for with Devonte Graham is that going into the offseason, you can sign and trade him. And by signing and trading him, you can allow him to get max money with another team, but you can also bring back pieces that you can put around Lamelo Ball. Whether it's draft picks, whether it's players, at least get something for him. But the one thing that the Hornets cannot afford to do right now is to put Devonte Graham in a situation where he walks away and you get nothing in return for him. That's the worst thing that can happen. So you can't trade him. So you have to put him in a situation where he can get max money next year. And the best you can do is get a sign and trade pulled off with another team where you can bring in some pieces. Now, there are some teams that could use a guard like Devonte Graham. When you look at the Clippers, I don't know how that actually will work with their cap situation. All right. when you look at Dallas, all right, there are a lot of teams, Orlando with the injury to Markelle Fultz, there are teams that could use him as a scoring punch and as a point guard. Because to be honest, aside from his bad shot taking, he's actually has a fairly high assist to turnover ratio, and he's a decent playmaker. He struggles to defend. All right, but I think with some teams, if you put him in the right system, that's fine. That's fine. He still defends at a competent level. He's just not a pushover. All right, that's just the honest assessment of his game. So the one thing that we know is going forward in the future, it's highly unlikely that Devonte Graham is gonna be a piece that you keep on this team for the future. But as it stands right now, this season, you're stuck with him. And with James Borrego being stuck with them, James Borrego, Mitch Kupchak, and Michael Jordan also have to do what? They have to look at the basketball side of this as well. And the basketball side of this means keep Devonte Graham happy so that we can, in the offseason, convince him to allow us to do a sign and trade at best so we can get pieces in return for him. Otherwise, he can walk away and you get nothing, which is the worst possible situation for a Charlotte Hornet team that's completely depleted right now, and they cannot afford to let, one of their leading scorers on their team walk away and you get zero for him in return. All right, the NBA is about assets and using those assets to build around your stars. All right. Again, it would be a horrible move by Mitch Kupchak to allow him to walk and get nothing in return. So that's the reality for Devonte Graham. He's a solid player. He is struggling to shoot the ball this year, but playing basketball in the NBA is a little bit more than just making shots all the time. He does other things on the court well, and this is what allows James Borrego to keep him on the court. All right. And with a guy like Devonte Graham, I feel like he's in a shooting slump. He's only 20 games in. We've seen other great shooters in this league start the season off in similar shooting slumps. When we talk about Kyle Korvers, we saw Klay Thompson do it. If you go back to the 90s, we see Reggie Miller start the season like this a few times, going 20 and 30 games into the season, struggling to shoot the ball. But shooters shoot. I like the fact that he hasn't lost confidence and stopped shooting, which is the worst thing you can do as a shooter. And he's still continuing to give effort defensively and make good decisions with the ball because he's not turning the ball over at a high clip. So that's the reality of Devonte Graham. He will be on this team throughout the year. As much as Lamelo Ball fans bash him and you disrespect his game and you call him trash and you call him favorite of the coach, he's actually a good player. But he's actually a good player. And there are good positives to his game. He's just not a good piece to put alongside Lamelo Ball. And this is why I say this roster is what we call a flawed roster. But I think Devonte Graham, the peculiar puzzle of Devonte Graham can only be fixed in the offseason, hopefully with a sign and trade. I still don't know what exact pieces you can bring in for him. It's going to be based on the teams that are interested in him. But since the second player we've discussed is Devonte Graham, let's go ahead and move on to the next key player for this team. All right, so next up we got Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward recently signed to the Charlotte Hornets. Obviously, you guys see the size of this massive contract that he signed. This was something that the Charlotte Hornets had to do. This was something that the Charlotte Hornets had to do because free agents don't generally trend towards signing with the Charlotte Hornets. How do we know this? We know this because even with Montrezl Harrell, a prize free agent, 6th man of the year, last year, he was offered a slightly larger than normal contract to come join this team, and he also turned down the opportunity to come to Charlotte and took less money to stay in LA. All right, so we know the demographics play a lot into where players want to play. All right, and to get certain players to go to certain cities, a team like Charlotte is going to have to overpay guys. I think this is one of the reasons why they've set themselves up to have an extremely absorbent amount of cap space going into this summer. All right. I think they're doing a good job of building towards the future. But again, as we talk about the Charlotte Hornets right now and what they can do this year, I mean, if you're realistically talking about them making the playoff race with this roster, you have to go into it understanding that as constructed, this is a flawed roster. All right. You know, as the number 3 pick, with getting Lamelo Ball as the number 3 pick when he was projected to go 1 or 2, I think that kind of shifted the Charlotte Hornets plans with regards to how they plan to transition going into the future. All right, so now you have to make roster modifications based on the future talent that you have. And Lamelo Ball and Gordon Hayward, they are the future of this team. All right, that's the reality of the situation. With Gordon Hayward, you see right here, he's making $28 million this year, 29 the next, 30, and then 31. Another thing that Gordon Hayward has is a 15% trade kicker. He has a 15% trade kicker. So if the Charlotte Hornets decide to trade Gordon Hayward, the team that trades for him is going to have to pay him 15% in additional salary. That's millions of dollars. So essentially, Gordon Hayward is stuck with this team. He's untradeable. I doubt that most teams at his age are going to pay a 15% trade kicker for him. All right. But at the end of the day, he's averaging 23 points a game, 5.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists. Easily the most productive and best player on this team. All right. He's that settling presence. All right. When it seems like when this team can't make shots, he's the one there to make the shot. All right. When everyone's struggling, he's been pretty consistent. So I think he is a great piece to put alongside Lamelo because of his calming presence. All right, so next up we got Terry Rozier. We got Terry Rozier in his contract. Terry Rozier making $18 million this year. As you guys can see, $18.9 million this year, 17 the next. Again, Terry Rozier is one of those players where he's getting slightly overpaid because even to bring him into Charlotte when they did the sign and trade for Kemba Walker, because they didn't want to see Kemba Walker walk away for free. All right, they slightly overpaid to bring in a guy like Terry Rozier. Again, this is the only way that the Charlotte Hornets can bring in talent. All right, and again, we're talking about the realistic situation, the reality of the Charlotte Hornets situation. The reality of it is that Terry Rozier is not an all-star caliber guard. He's a good guard. He's not an all-star caliber guard. To win championships, you need all-star caliber players, not just 1 or 2. You need multiple. All right. So Terry Rozier, again, this year averaging 18.4 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. I mean, he's playing solid. All right. But again, the reality of the situation, you drafted Lamelo Ball. We have to get this guy into the starting lineup. How do we get Lamelo Ball into the starting lineup? Realistically, do we bench Devonte Graham? Well, that's probably not going to be very wise. Understanding that, as I mentioned earlier, Devonte Graham is on an expiring $1.6 million contract. You don't want that type of asset to walk away and you get nothing in return. You keep him in your good graces, and maybe he can allow you the opportunity to conduct the sign and trade as he maybe moves on to the brighter pastures with another team. This is how you build a team. You don't build a team by making bad relationships with your players. And benching Devonte Graham, a player who has played far above his value, if you're just being honest. Benching him is not the smartest move for this team. All right. On top of the fact that Devonte Graham is giving you your best assist to turnover ratio on the team. He takes care of the ball. All right. But when we talk about Terry Rozier, one of these 2 guards, Devonte Graham and Terry Rozier, are both in reality shooting guards. They're not true point guards. All right. So we have to understand that one of these 2 guys is going to have to get moved along to see Lamelo Ball blossom into the player that he needs to be. On top of the fact that if you have to move one of these 2 guys, you have to have a way to bring in assets to make the team better. What assets can you get out of Devonte Graham right now with $1.6 million? $1.6 million is not even money-wise equivalent to trading for a first-round draft pick. So at this time, you can't even trade Devonte Graham equally for a first-round draft pick from any team. If you need to make a trade, if you're looking to bring in pieces to make Lamelo Ball better, it would be wise for this team to trade Terry Rozier. All right, now his contract next year could be valuable for your team because it's an expiring contract and it can help a team clear salary cap space. All right, but he's also a productive player that could benefit a playoff team. All right, when we look at teams, when we look at all of the teams in the league that need a scoring point guard, a guard that can actually make, to some extent be a solid playmaker, Terry Rozier is that guy. All right, he's not a bad player. Let's not do that. And this year, he's played exceptionally well, especially coming off last year where he played atrociously for the entire year. Again, this is the reality of their situation. If you want to make this roster better, Terry Rozier's $18 million is really the only way to do it. It's really the only way to do it. All right. You have to move it. With that $18 million, you could potentially bring in one piece, draft picks, or two pieces to bolster your roster. You know what we need on this team. On the Charlotte Hornets, the need is obviously at the center position, the small forward position, and a true backup point guard position. They have holes that need to be filled. All right, but again, there's no fix a flat. There's no quick fix for this problem. It's gonna take years to get this roster where it needs to be, and even after years, it's still hard because you got to think. Even if you want to trade Terry Rozier, you have to find a trade partner that has something that you want in return. I mean, I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, the Charlotte Hornets need a Miles Turner," but do the Pacers need a Terry Rozier? If we're being honest about the situation, probably not. They just signed Karis LeVert. They have a host of other good guards over there. Do they need a Terry Rozier? No. So getting Miles Turner is probably out of the question. All right, we look at all the other centers. We look at Jared Allen. Do the Cleveland Cavaliers need another shooting guard? They just drafted Isaac Okoro. They have Kyle Sexton and Darius Garland. They have Cedi Osman. Do they need another shooting guard? So getting Jared Allen out of the question. There's no need there for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And when we talk about these trades, so again, we have to find, you have to find a need for another team, and they have to have a player that you actually need in return. I mean, we look at the Sacramento Kings. They have Hassan Whiteside, all right, who, in a sense, struggles defensively in his own right. I mean, he's a great shot blocker. But let's say you're looking for a big. They have Tyrese Halliburton, who plays the 1 and the 2. They have Buddy Hield. I mean, is Terry Rozier going to go to Sacramento and come off the bench? Probably not. I mean, let's look at the reality of their situation. We talk about they need this, they need that. Okay, how do you make it happen? Because the reality of the situation, it takes time. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of phone calls and networking to make these trades happen. And they don't just happen just like that. There has to be a need for all parties involved. And unfortunately for Terry Rozier, the teams that actually could use a Terry Rozier don't have the cap space or the flexibility to make a trade for him. We talk about the Clippers, extremely over the cap. They need a Terry Rozier. They don't have the cap space to bring in a Terry Rozier. All right? But I know the Charlotte Hornets would love to have a Zubac on their team. All right, but how can you make the money work in this trade? Because if you can convince the Clippers to part ways with Zubac, solid big in this league, you still got to make the money work. That means the Clippers are giving up 1 to 2 players just to bring in a Terry Rozier. Does that make them better? Let's look at this reasonably. So with Terry Rozier, he is the key piece to this team. He's the key piece that's going to determine how this team goes forward in the future. But with him and Devonte Graham, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where these guys end up walking away from your team and you get nothing for them. These players are all assets. All right, every player is considered to be an asset. And just like with your bank account, you don't want to lose an asset and get nothing in return. And that's how we have to look at this right here. But Terry Rozier playing solid this year. I predict that he's going to be on the trade block. All right, but the Charlotte Hornets have a lot of holes that they can fill by moving this guy. That's the good thing about the trade of Terry Rozier. All right, they have multiple trade partners because they have multiple positions of need. Multiple positions of need. And they should be able to move him by the trade deadline to kind of open up that starting spot. All right, maybe giving them some more size in the starting lineup. They're extremely small. If you're going to start a 6'1" Terry Rozier, all right, and a 6 foot Devonte Graham, All right, you have an extremely small, a small front court or back court. But this is the reality of Terry Rozier. You know, I wish him the best. I don't think he's going to be stuck with Charlotte, but this is the key piece to really seeing how this team is going to evolve going forward into the future. You got to trade Terry Rozier. You have to trade Terry Rozier. Next up, we got Cody Zeller. Cody Zeller, man. Injured this year, came back, had a shaky start to his comeback after dealing with those injuries, but since he's been very solid. 8.9 points per game, 8 rebounds. Cody Zeller, again, just like Gordon Hayward, he doesn't have the playoff experience, but he has a lot of experience. He's a veteran forward. All right, we saw the defensive job that he did against Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know when a lot of people talk about that win against the Bucks, nobody gives Cody Zeller credit for some of the things that he did great. All right, he played great defense on Giannis Antetokounmpo. All right, he was great at rebounding the ball, and the one thing that he gets zero credit for, that a lot of coaches in this league will give him credit for, is that he is one of the best screen setters in this league. All right, when you're running the pick and roll with Cody Zeller, he's going to set elite level screens. Again, most of these Lamelo Ball fan channels won't speak on the positives of some of these players. All right, because Cody Zeller does some of the ugly things. But again, even with Cody Zeller is the second player on this team that has a valuable contract for other teams. All right, Cody Zeller's $15 million. All right, when we look at teams that need a big on an expiring contract because they don't want that salary lingering on their books for years and years on end, it's easy for me to look at the Lakers. All right, they have a clear need at the center position. They have a clear-cut need at the center position for a Cody Zeller. Now, what is it going to cost? What is it going to cost? No. What is it going to cost the team to bring Cody Zeller's contract in? All right, a lot of people say Kuzma. A lot of people will say give up Kuzma. We know that the small forward position is something that the Charlotte Hornets need desperately. They need a lengthy wing player on that team. Kuz could potentially come off the bench. He could start. He's used to either role. All right. Will he make that team immediately better? Probably not. Defensively, they would get way, way worse. All right. And then you actually create another hole for yourself if you move a Cody Zeller, because now you don't have a true center on your roster. And now you're stuck playing small ball. So if you move a guy like Cody Zeller, you have to be mindful of the fact that you need to have centers on this roster. And so you're going to have a lot of people say Nick Richards, Vernon Carey, these guys aren't ready. These guys aren't ready. There's a reason why Vernon Carey's in the G League bubble right now. Come on, let's stop acting as if Vernon Carey's ready to start and be great in the NBA right now. The best center in this draft is struggling right now, James Wiseman. And he's a far superior player to a Vernon Carey. Vernon Carey struggled in his time at Duke against college players. So we're going to be realistic about Vernon Carey. He's not a starting center in this league. And if Vernon Carey is the starting center on your team, all right, then you might as well just sign up for the draft. Sign up for the lottery. Just go sign up for the lottery because you're not going to be very competitive. So I like what they're doing with Vernon Carey. They send him to the G League bubble to do what? Prepare. Why? Because as of right now, there's not a lot of minutes for him to get at the center position. All right, with Bismack Biyombo, with Cody Zeller, with PJ Washington, Vernon Carey's unfortunately the fourth center on this team, and he's not ready to go. All right, so when we got Cody Zeller, they have to be careful about moving this contract because then you're stuck with Bismack Biyombo at the starting center spot, PJ Washington's the backup, all right, and then you're looking at guys like Nick Richards and Vernon Carey as your third backups. All right, so now by trading Cody Zeller, you may strengthen yourself somewhere else, but now you completely deplete yourself another place. Again, when I say flawed roster, this is what I mean. They're not deep at multiple positions. And when you have a flawed roster, it takes years to accomplish this. It's not an easy task because you have to be successful in the draft. You have to be successful at developing players, and you have to hit home runs in free agency. All right, but it doesn't happen after 20 games of basketball. All right, so Charlotte Hornet fans, LaMelo Ball fanboys, calm down, slow down. All right, Allow James Borrego, Mitch Kupchak, and Michael Jordan to do their jobs. This is a 5-year process, not a 5-minute process like you guys wanted to see. All right. When we're talking about the Charlotte Hornets, the realistic output, how can they build a winner around Lamelo Ball? What players can they bring in? Obviously, bringing in more dynamic players, bringing in players. If you can get your hands on dynamic bigs like a Jared Allen, guys who can catch those lobs. All right. Maybe a Clint Capella. All right. If you can find a way to get your hands on these guys, awesome, great. But you don't have the pieces on this roster to make viable trades that are going to make you better. So I like what they're doing. All right. Just based on everything that they're doing, it looks like they're setting themselves up for free agency. I do think that Cody Zeller will get moved. I do think he will get moved. It's hard to say exactly what team, but obviously Cody Zeller is the type of player that's probably going to get moved to a team that's competing in the playoffs. All right, because those are the types of teams that need a Cody Zeller on an expiring contract. They don't need his money lingering on the books for years and years on end. All right, and maybe they can re-sign him, all right, for less money, because he's probably not going to make it $15 million again per year for the rest of his career. But this is the reality. We got Cody Zeller. All right, next up we got PJ Washington, one of the few bright spots on this team. Other than getting injured. PJ Washington's been pretty solid. I'm not going to lie. Other than getting injured, he's been solid. Let's pull up his contract here. Let's see what we have. Oh, so we got PJ Washington. All right, he's still on his rookie deal. All right, PJ Washington still on that rookie deal. And hold on, let me pull up the salaries right here. There we go. Okay, so we got PJ Washington on his rookie deal. He's set to, have his player option. He's set to have his player option in a couple years. So he's going to have that player option in 2022-23. All right, he's eligible for his qualifying offer that following year. All right, again, as one of the bright spots. But, these rookies, these young rookies that you're developing, all right, you have to understand that his $4 million a year, he's going to outplay his value. PJ Washington puts in his production is far exceeds a player that makes $4 million a year. He's not going to get traded. All right. And if he does get traded, it's probably not going to be until towards the end of his rookie deal, maybe where the team can execute some type of sign and trade. But as it stands right now, he's been a bright spot on this team outside of the injury concerns. All right, you guys let me know what you think about PJ Washington. I think he's part of this core. And, when you're looking towards the future of this team, I think he's included in that core. To me, he's included in that core. All right, but I think he's a great young player with a lot of promise. He showed some extremely high ceiling in some games. All right, he surprised me in some games with the production that he can put out. He's great for the team if they need to put in a small ball lineup. But again, you can't rely on these small ball lineups to carry you into the playoffs. So PJ Washington, the one thing that he doesn't have on this team, he doesn't have a viable backup power forward. So he finds himself playing a multitude of positions. He's playing extended minutes at power forward. Sometimes he can play minutes at small forward. Other times he's playing minutes at center, whether he's starting or the backup center. He's kind of all over the place. That makes him more valuable, but it tells you the flaws in this roster. All right, that just tells you the flaws. And you know what? This is the Charlotte Hornets. Small teams, small markets like this generally have these types of problems because nobody wants to play in Charlotte. All right, now we'll see this offseason what players they might be able to overpay to come to Charlotte. And when they overpay players, I'm sure the fan base is going to be mad and say, oh, these guys don't deserve this money. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the only way Charlotte can bring in players to help, if you need a backup power forward, all right, for PJ Washington, all right, if you need a backup true point guard for Lamelo Ball, if you need a backup center or a real center on this roster, you're going to have to overpay guys. That's the reality of this situation. But it's not going to be resolved with any trade. This roster is not going to get fixed with any trade. The only thing that they can fix with a trade going into the trade deadline in March is maybe moving Terry Rozier, so Lamelo Ball has a clear-cut role and path to start on this team. That definitively makes them a much worse team. All right, but the Lamelo Ball fans get what they want. Lamelo Ball starting. He's starting now. Right? And it's just, again, it's odd. All right, so this is why I think it's extremely funny when people run around blaming James Borrego as if he's the end all be all. And you're playing with a roster this bad. I don't care what plays or sets you draw up. You're going to lose in the NBA if you don't have good players. Drawing up great plays in the NBA does not win you games. Having great players wins you games. You got some of the worst X's and O's coaches like Tyronn Lue who can win a championship when you give them great players. Luke Walton looked like a great coach. All right, when he was sitting on the sideline in Golden State winning game after game. Because he had great players. He's been in LA and Sacramento and looks completely garbage. Great players will make you win games. You will win games with great players. They don't have great players. So let's hold off on just running around blaming the coaches. Now, if you're in a situation like the Philadelphia 76ers where you have great players and you can't get over the hump, or when you're talking about a guy like Mark Jackson who had great players but couldn't get over the hump, well, that's when you start seeing coaches get moved. When you have the great players and you can't execute and get the job done. You know, and as we see, Doc Rivers has the Sixers playing far better than they looked last year. Steve Kerr, when he went to Golden State, they won a championship. He had them playing better at a championship level because they had championship level players. The Hornets don't have winners. They don't have great players. They don't have proven players on this roster. And the most proven player that they have on this roster always finds himself injured in the most critical moments, and that's Gordon Hayward. And again, luckily, he's been healthy this year. He's been playing great. And maybe that trend will change with him. But as it stands now, it's just not a winning team. And it's still a flawed roster. But PJ Washington is one of those players that amidst everything that you have to do to fix this roster, you cannot lose a guy like PJ Washington. You have to continue to work with him. You have to continue to develop him. And you can't overtly emphasize the focus on Lamelo Ball when you got a lot of other young players on this roster that also need attention. They also need to get developed, and they also need an identity and a role going forward on this particular team. All right, but that's PJ Washington. All right, we got Caleb Martin. Okay, so when we look at Caleb Martin, we see his contract down here. He's only making $1.5 million. His salary next year, this is non-guaranteed. So he's on a non-guaranteed contract. So they can cut him this summer as soon as the season ends and not owe him a penny. Either way, it's just $1.7 million. I think what they'll do is they'll kind of wait around to see how they can fill out this roster. And they may sign him and guarantee that $1.7 million. You know, just so they can have a solid wing player. You know, he's not great. He's okay. He's not great. He's solid defensively. He's atrocious offensively. You know, but these are the type of players that you kind of have to deal with until you fix your flawed roster, because you still have to fill out your roster to some degree. And you want to fill it out with players that are at least going to compete. The one thing that I can say about both of the twins, Caleb and Cody Martin, is that they compete. They compete. Now, again, they might make bonehead plays. They might turn the ball over. They might miss shots. But defensively, they're always going to compete. They're going to play. They're going to come in and play with a high energy. And that's all you can really ask for when you're dealing with low-tier players that are they're making the NBA minimum. All right, and that takes us. Let's just go ahead and transition right into Cody Martin, who's obviously averaging less. He's not as productive, doesn't get as much playing time, but as you can see, he's on the exact same contract as his brother. All right, both minimum deals. All right, both with contracts that can be released at the end of this season. His salary for next year is not guaranteed. If they waive him by July, they don't owe this $1.7 million, but it's going to be all based on who's available in the free agency market. Do we need to clear $1 million in cap space to bring this player in? If they do need to clear $1 million in cap space, well, Cody Martin or Caleb Martin is going to be one of the first to go. It's the reality of the situation. If they can't bring a guy in, maybe they hold on to one or both of these guys. All right, but neither one of these guys are tradable, y'all. Unless you're just throwing in a player just to kind of make the money work. Let's say in a trade with Terry Rozier, and you need a little bit of extra salary on top to make it work. But at the end of the day, running around saying we need to trade Cody Martin and Caleb Martin. First, if you're running around saying we need to trade Cody Martin and Caleb Martin, that means you don't think they're very good players. So if you don't think they're very good players, why would another team want players that aren't very good? That don't make sense. So the team that either takes Cody or Caleb Martin or both, they have to see some type of value in him as well. And then they have to also be willing to give you a piece that fits what you're trying to do. So unfortunately, they're not making enough money to realistically bring in a player that's going to be a difference maker on this team. All right, these are the guys that you sign to kind of fill out your roster in a shortened, condensed season like this, where you kind of had to sign guys on the fly when the season started right on a whim. I think these were two great signings. You got two brothers, you keep them both happy. You see what they have. Obviously, we know this year's a wash for this team. It's about developing. And if I'm being honest, I don't think these guys will be on the roster next year. I think they'll both get waived. I think they may bring back Caleb Martin next year on a similar deal, but I don't think Cody Martin will be back. I think these guys will get waived to clear salary cap space for free agency. All right, we got the curious case of Malik Monk. Now, Malik Monk is a great example of a player who's the coach just doesn't trust. I mean, he started this season out with multiple DNPs. All right, when you got to understand, at the NBA level, when you have a player of Malik Monk's caliber and he's getting DNP'd, one, there's either a behavioral or personal issue that's going on behind the scenes that the team is just trying to address privately. All right, now going into the bubble, you know, and if you're familiar with the Charlotte Hornets, or the Charlotte Hornets are one of the few teams in the NBA that not only allow the NBA to do the NBA mandated drug tests, but they also have their own drug testing policy for their players. All right, so as we know, last year, Malik Monk failed a drug test that was mandated by the NBA at random. Going into the NBA bubble, Malik Monk also failed a random drug test, but this wasn't mandated by the NBA. It was a drug test mandated by the Charlotte Hornets, and he failed. And for a guy like Malik Monk, you just get suspended by the NBA for failing a drug test. And then you come into the NBA bubble where obviously the NBA is going to be a bit more lax on testing players, but when the team tests you, you don't pass. That's not a good look. Because the one thing that you have to do as a coach is you cannot just play talent. You have to play the guys that you trust. Talent doesn't always win you games. All right. Now, obviously, to some degree, you need talented players. But when you're talking about a guy like Malik Monk, Malik Monk is not a world beater. He's not an all-star. He's not a superstar in this league. Those are the guys that win you championships. When you're talking about Malik Monk, a player that can be good, at Malik Monk's best, I think he's a fringe all-star caliber player. But you got to start building some type of culture. What type of team are we going to be? Are we going to be one of those teams where we allow players to run rampant and do what they want? All right, we got no culture. All right, we got no discipline. All right. Or are we going to be a team where we have a culture? We're going to have a culture of players being clean, no drugs. Every team has a different culture. Every team allows certain things. Every team has something that they don't allow. Some coaches, Tom Thibodeau, more strict, more disciplined. Other coaches, when we look at other coaches like Steve Kerr, Luke Walton, more relaxed, allow players to have a little bit more freedom with what they do and or say. That's about your culture. I think Malik Monk was getting DNP because of the culture. They're trying to create a certain type of culture. Because of the injuries, we're starting to see him get sprinkled into the starting lineup, and he's played great at times, especially against the Bucks. He made some big-time shots. I think they dropped 34, 36 points, something like that. great game on the season, averaging 9.9 points, 1.4 rebounds. All right, but when we look at his contract, let's pull up his contract right here. So Malik Monk's contract, $5 million this year, $7 million. He has a $7 million potential qualifying offer next year. $7 million potential qualifying offer for next year. Is his contract movable? Well, we know that they've been shopping him around. But other teams, and if you want to hear the reality of the situation, other teams are reluctant because of his drug history. This is the business side of the basketball. Don't get in your feelings because the man has had drug issues in the past. Don't get in your feelings about that. I understand it could be a touchy subject, but this is, Malik Monk is the one that made his drug habit and drug issues public. All right, now the team didn't publicize the second failed drug test. They did a good job of keeping that behind closed doors. It did leak out to some degree. The NBA didn't when he failed the first one. So we have to look at this. We have to look at, is he the future of the team? All right, we know he's a great scorer. Is he a great defender? And he plays the 2 guard. All right, is he a 2 guard of the future? All right, man, we're looking at filling out this roster. You got to think of all the shooting guards we have on this roster. Devonte Graham's really a 2. Terry Rozier's a 2. Malik Monk's a 2. Cody and Caleb Martin are both 2s and wing players. You're loaded with all of these guards. Lamelo Ball is really the only true point guard on this roster. So if you can parlay one of these guys, if you can parlay a Terry Rozier, if you can parlay a Malik Monk, if you can trade these guys and maybe bring in a true backup point guard, that's one of the positions that you can fix this year. All right, by maybe moving one of these guys and bringing in a true backup point guard, one hole that's filled. Now going into the offseason, now you only have 2 to 3 holes that you need to address before you fill out your roster. I don't think that their issues at the center and power forward spot can be resolved before the trade deadline. I think they're stuck with what they have at center. But because of the amount of wing players and 2 guards that they have on this team, they can afford to lose 1 or 2 to bolster up the point guard position, or maybe even a small forward position, all right, before the trade deadline hits. Again, but it's going to be about who wants Malik Monk, and if the Charlotte Hornets, do they trust him? Are they going to stay with this guy? Are they going to keep him around? I think that's the decision. Now, Charlotte Hornets fans are falling in love with him because he can score the ball. I see it much different. I think he scores the ball very inconsistently. And he's a average at best defender. I think I can do better than that. I think there are guys out there that appreciate the game a little bit more, that aren't going to be the headaches. With Malik Monk right here, you don't know what you have. That's the reality of Malik Monk's situation. All right, we got the rookie Vernon Carey. The rookie Vernon Carey. Curious situation, man. He's only averaging 1 point a game. I think he has a lot of promise. I told people I think he was going to be one of the biggest surprises of the second round. That was my opinion. That's how good that's how much potential he has. He's just not ready right now. All right, so he's the 3rd or 4th center on this team. They did the right thing by sending him down to the G League bubble. Obviously, he's not, on the contract that he's on, he's not a tradable contract. There's not enough money there to really make it work for other teams, unless you're just adding on a piece like into a bigger trade like with Terry Rozier. But I don't think they'll be trading Vernon Carey Jr. I think he'll be with this team for at least 2 to 3 years just to see what they have in the youngster. All right. But I think he'll be solid given time. He's only 19 years old. All right. He's only 19. And I think people forget that. And you can see right here, he was a 32nd pick in the second round. Come on, y'all. There's only a handful of guys who are really pulling it off coming out the second round. But I think he's a project that they can develop over time. There's no need to rush that. All right, we got Bismack Biyombo, backup center to Cody Zeller. He started a lot this year. Because of the injuries to Cody Zeller. Now, normally, and this was surprising to me, because normally when Bismack Biyombo is able to get into the starting lineup, he's highly productive. Usually double digits in rebounds, double digits in points. I've seen him do that with multiple teams. This year he got into the starting lineup, and because of the pass-friendly nature of this roster, the Charlotte Hornets, a lot of people don't know, they lead the league in assists. They move the ball the most. They have a pass-oriented offense. That they pass the ball more than any team in the NBA. And that's why it was surprising to me when I hear some of these Charlotte Hornet or Lamelo Ball fan channels say that they need to move the ball more or this. I said the Charlotte Hornets pass the ball more than any team in the NBA. I don't know how much more they can move the ball. They're averaging 27 assists per game. They lead the NBA in assists per game. They move the ball plenty. But when you move the ball that much, it's to a detriment of bigs like Bismack Biyombo and Cody Zeller. They're not going to get those same paint touches. Not that you want Bismack Biyombo getting many paint touches, all right, unless it's a lob or a layup right at the rim. All right, but it's going to affect his scoring. All right, I think because of their pace, they play it slightly past your face. With teams shooting more threes, you're going to see his rebound numbers drop. All right. Previously, in other teams that he played with, the pace was slower. He was able to accumulate more rebounds. But that's the situation with Bismack Biyombo. I think Bismack Biyombo, he was slightly overpaid on his initial contract with Charlotte. He's only making $3.5 million this year. Maybe we can see this guy get packaged in a trade. I mean, again, he's one of those guys that a contending team would love to have him on their roster. Again, like the Lakers. If you look at the Lakers, they would love to have a guy like Bismack Biyombo. Right, when you got great passers, like Schroeder, like Schroeder and LeBron James, who great ball placement are going to be able to get him easy layups. Bismack Biyombo is going to defend and rebound at a high level and not care about scoring. He would fit the Lakers system perfect. So again, a potential trade to the Lakers with some of these players is very, very possible. It's going to be about, do the Lakers have players that the Charlotte Hornets need? Again, the only player that I see is a Kuzma. So when we look at the Kuzma's contract situation, Kuzma just got signed to a contract. Can they finesse? And get a Cody Zeller and a Bismack Biyombo or one of those two guys? Maybe. But it's all about making the money work. Those salaries have to somehow match up. All right, you can't be too far over or too far under. You have to make the money work. All right, let's think critically about these situations. Let's not be emotional. As fans, we tend to get emotional and say things irrationally, but we don't look at the business side of this. These guys are getting paid millions of dollars with the CBA agreement, with NBA bylaws. We have to take into consideration the reality of the business side of this before we just jump off on a tangent saying this is what teams need to do, or this coach needs to get fired, or he's not using this guy the right way. There's a business aspect to this that needs to get analyzed. That's what we're doing here at FYF Sports, man. We're here to analyze also the business aspect of this as well. We're going to move on to the next player. And again, we're not going to go through all the players on this roster. We're not going to go through everybody. All right. But, we are going to go through the primary guys. Oh, and Bismack Biyombo was actually the last guy. So, I mean, we went through everybody. We talked about Gordon Hayward. We talked about Terry Rozier. All right. We talked about all of these players. All right, we went over the salaries. All right, the reality of the Charlotte Hornets situation, y'all. All right, and we do a quick recap of this roster or these salaries. The reality of the situation. All right, so the reality of the Charlotte Hornets situation, when you look at their roster, when you look at all their salaries, is that they have a flawed roster, you guys. They have a flawed roster where they have a lot of guys making very little money. As you can see here, you got some top-heavy players with Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier. You got Cody Zeller on an expiring contract, which is valuable. It's a valuable trade piece, but unfortunately for the Charlotte Hornets, Cody Zeller's a piece that they can't afford to lose if you're looking to make the playoffs. I think if you trade Cody Zeller, you essentially eliminate any potential chance that you have as far as getting to the playoffs. But it could bode well. It could bode well in the future based on the assets that you get back. So that's a tough decision that you have to make there. Nicholas Batum, I told you about how his contract is not off the books. They owe him $27 million, over $27 million. All right, that was due to the stretch provision that stretched out over 3 years. That's going to be on their books for the next 3 years. You got Lamelo Ball's contract. Obviously, we know he's the future. This is the guy that you're looking to build around. But how do you build around him? You have to make tough decisions. That's what you have to do. Tough decisions are going to be with Cody Zeller. Do we move him or do we try to fight for the 8th seed? Right? And you got to think of the repercussions of fighting for an 8th seed. When you're an 8th seed in the NBA, when you're a 9 or 10 seed and you may be getting those playing games, the only thing that you win for that is a shitty draft pick. That's the only thing you get for that. This is why some teams really have to look to, are we going to tank? Are we really going to go for it? All right, when we got Malik Monk, we're looking at his situation. He's another tradable piece. There are some teams out there interested. All right, but can he be trusted? All right, he's shown the perplexity to not pass drug tests. That could be a concern. All right, especially with him having a qualifying offer coming up next year. All right, so if a team's going to invest in him, I think the Charlotte Hornets will move off of him over the summer or before the trade deadline. If he doesn't get moved by the trade deadline, then I think he's going to be stuck in Charlotte for the next 2 years. PJ Washington, obviously, we know he's a bright spot. I like PJ Washington. We got Miles Bridges. I love Miles Bridges, man. Again, similar to PJ Washington, Miles Bridges is one of those players, and I think we didn't talk about him a lot today, but he's one of those guys. He actually went to James Borrego and said, you know what, I want to come off the bench this year. He thought he plays better coming off the bench because he can have time to really analyze and look at the game before he comes in. And there are a lot of players in the league like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it takes a level of humility to be able to go to the coach and say that to some degree. All right, but it's also paid huge dividends for Lamelo Ball. So now we see the connection that he has with a guy like Miles Bridges when they play together. That's something, again, that's something that you can highlight going forward into the future. More of the flawed roster when you're dealing with guys like Bismack Biyombo, $3.5 million this year. Again, another guy that could potentially get traded, but again, he's only making $3 million. It's going to be hard to move that salary and make it work if you're looking to bring in a player that can actually help your team. Most players in the league are making way more than $3 million. Gonna be hard to make that contract work unless you're packaging him with multiple guys. All right, we got Devonte Graham. I told you about his situation, $1.6 million. He can't get moved. The only thing you can do at this time is keep him happy and hope that he allows you to conduct a sign and trade in the offseason. It's really the only thing that you can hope for. You don't want to allow an asset like that walk away for free. Now, fans will say, let him walk for free. Basketball-wise, it's one of the dumbest decisions you can make. All right, this is why fans stay in the position of fans, and this is why GMs are getting paid millions of dollars to make these tough decisions right here. And it has to start with Devonte Graham. All right. Devonte Graham and LaMelo's Ball, their games don't mesh well. That's obvious. All you have to do is watch. Their games coincide with one another. So we know that Devonte Graham has to go. All right. But you have to make it happen in a manner that allows Devonte Graham to get paid, because he will get paid. Whether you do a sign and trade or not, he's going to get paid. Whether you think he's worth the money or not, he's going to get paid. Do not let your assets walk away for free. This is why they did a sign and trade with the Celtics to get Terry Rozier, so that they didn't lose Kemba for nothing. All right, come on, y'all. We got to be smart, y'all. Be smart about this. Cody and Caleb Martin again. 1-year deals. All right, non-guaranteed contracts next year. Potentially could be on the roster next year. I don't think they will be. And I think you really got to focus this offseason to really strengthen this roster. Jalen McDaniels looks promising. He's a rookie. He's a rookie, though. They sent him to the G League bubble to really get ready. I think they're going to bring him back and start playing in the second half of the season. And I really think that they're going to start playing in the second half of the season, because I think some of these guys, when we're talking about Terry Rozier and Bismack Biyombo, I think some of these guys are going to get moved. This roster's not going to look the same after the trade deadline. So it was smart to send some of these guys to the G League so they can be ready once the trade deadline hits and some of these players are on the move. Vernon Carey, we talked about him and his promise. Nick Richards, again, another rookie, looks solid. I like his size. I like his strength down low. But again, he's another young guy that's right now is just not ready out of Kentucky. So Charlotte Hornets, y'all, in a nutshell. Charlotte Hornets in a nutshell. They did the best thing that they can do by drafting Lamelo Ball. That's the smartest thing that you can do. Draft the player and figure it out later. But now they're at the stage where now they have to figure it out. All right. So, again, I'm not one to bash some of these guys. You know, I look at everybody's game. Honestly, I give them a fair critique. All of these guys have weaknesses. All of these guys have strengths. But, I mean, we all know that Lamelo Ball is the best player / prospect on this team. Gordon Hayward. Lamelo Ball and Gordon Hayward are the two pieces that you need to build around. Everybody else is expendable, all right, to some degree. Now, I feel like you should hold on to guys like Miles Bridges and PJ Washington, as we talked about. But when we're talking about the Terry Roziers and Devonte Grahams, when we look at Devonte Graham and Terry Rozier, I think these are two guys that you maybe have to find a way to move so you can bolster these forward positions, because you're not going to succeed or win when you have Caleb and Cody Martin as your power forwards behind Gordon Hayward. That's not a formula for success. All right, when we look at a Malik Monk, again, is his head into basketball? All right, is his head into basketball? Is he going to do more than just score the ball? All right, but he's not a real backup point guard. This team has plenty of shooting guards. They have plenty of shooting guards. The problem is none of the shooting guards that they have mesh well with what Lamelo Ball does. Great. All right. None of these guys are elite shooters. Lamelo Ball needs elite shooters surrounding him if they want to succeed. So, again, they got a lot of problems to fix. I just implore you guys to just lay off of running around saying fire James Borrego. James Borrego is doing the best that he can do with a trash roster. And that's just me. That's the harsh reality of my words. It's not a very good roster, and it's not something that can be fixed with one trade. It's something that's going to take multiple off seasons. It's going to take some really smart moves, some really good drafting to change this roster over. There will be a roster overhaul. I just say allow this team time to get through it. All right, the process to get there is going to look ugly. Just ask the Philadelphia 76ers. Getting there is going to look ugly. But once you get it done, you're going to start seeing the fruits of your labor. So, again, you guys, let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about the Charlotte Hornets. All right. Let me know what you think about this team. Again, I think Lamelo Ball, again, whenever you have a guy like Lamelo Ball, you can't really complain. All right. But you have to build around him the right way. And then you have to also find what pieces work with him best. But make sure you hit the comments. Let me know what you think about this video. What are your thoughts on some of these players? All right. You know, did you go to tradenet.com? Did you see what trades you could potentially make that actually work for both teams? All right. What types of players can they use to make this team better? We know what they need. We know they need a center, athletic, lengthy wings. We know that they need more shooters, snipers who can knock down shots. All right. We know they need a backup point guard. But who are we going to bring in? And when you say who, can you make that trade make sense for both teams while also making the money work? These are the things that we talk about here at FYF Sports. But hey, it's been a great podcast episode, man. We're going to be back with more sports and news soon. Hey, but until then, it's FYF Sports.
Just a little FYI, FYF, 20K sub 6 months, what's next? They been hating at first, now they calling us the best. Hit up YouTube, tell them cut the check. Just a FYI, FYF, 20K sub 6 months, what's next? Woo, fuck your feelings, we all know who the real is. I be getting to it, ain't wasting no time. Walking straight in, we ain't waiting in line. Fuck your feelings, you don't care about mine. You a YouTube gangster, don't be yelling out slime. Or you talking LB, talking Ticket TV. Ain't nobody watching them, all the viewers be sleep. 5 years in, all your subs is your friends. Ticket TV, watch the cars again. Just a little FYI, FYF, 20K sub 6 months, what's next? They been hating at first, now they calling us the best. Hit up YouTube, tell them cut the check. Just a FYI, FYF, 20K sub 6 months, what's next? Woo, fuck your feelings, we all know who the real is. They all know, shop don't close, working 24, trying to make the channel grow. Look at them, pointing fingers, hating on the low. You can't compete with our podcast show. Couldn't make it in the league, so we got on TV. Crying by LeBron like a little baby. You must be crazy, trying to ever play me. Or you super tough until it's time to say cheese. Just a little FYI, FYF, 20K sub 6 months, what's next? They been hating at first, now they calling us the best. Hit up YouTube, tell them cut the check. Just a FYI, FYF, 20K sub 6 months, what's next? Woo, fuck your feelings, we all know who the real is.